As someone who consumes YouTube content as much as I make it these days, a category of video that really causes me to raise an eyebrow has always been that of the quote-unquote car critic. And car critics come from all places within the culture. Sometimes it's an automotive journalist, sometimes it's an experienced track driver, though more often it's a mechanic or someone versed in the engineering side of automotive design. I am going to argue that experience and credentialing do not necessarily make you a good critic. For all that you have learned within the automotive space, it is very easy to develop your own biases and to echo them in your discussions about cars past, present, or future. And nothing says this more than when a car critic will assign the title of shitbox to an entire manufacturer of cars that they straight up do not like. Are these cars really all that bad? Well, the answer is probably not. I mean, lemons do exist. My mother used to own a Chevrolet Equinox with so many manufacturing issues that it eventually was subject to a dealer buyback. And the Silverados from that same era were subject to the infamous AFM lifter failure scandal that should have resulted in lawsuits, but I'm really surprised did not. It was why my father had to trade his 2010 for a 2020. I think I discussed that in one of my Motorfest videos. But even that 2010 truck got a full 125,000 miles on it before it had to go. So any number of other things could have befallen it at that age. That's just life. That said, what about me? What do I drive, and what gives me the right to determine whether a car is reliable or a quote-unquote shitbox? The reason I'm making this video is because I drive a 2014 Jeep Compass. The Compass is honestly considered by car enthusiasts and critics alike to be one of the crappiest Jeeps made by Mopar/FCA/Stellantis, what have you. So when one fell into my lap in 2017, it had 39,000 miles on the odometer. It has just recently passed 103,000, and would you know it, it is still as pristine as the day I first drove it off the lot. The reason a lot of cars are considered unreliable often has more to do with the people who buy them. Car owners honestly suck at taking care of their cars and then complain when their cars inevitably break. And it's only when something does inevitably break that you're slammed with repair bills in the thousands of dollars. So I want to give the straight facts on how much I personally have sunk, or not sunk, into my Jeep Compass to avoid some of the costliest repairs. Let's talk about it. Before we actually get into this, I want to start by talking about what this car is. Like actual how it was built kind of shit. The engine is a 2.4 liter, 4-cylinder, world gasoline engine. This was a collab between Chrysler, Hyundai, and Mitsubishi. So even though Jeep was owned by Fiat Chrysler at the time, performance-wise, this Compass has more Korean and Japanese design work than it does Italian. This also shows in the mated transmission. I lucked out, and the 2014s were mated to a 6-speed automatic and not a CVT. Well, some had a CVT, but most did not. In maintaining the vehicle, I found out that the ATF used to lubricate this transmission is SP4, which is primarily used in Hyundai 6-speed transmissions, which in this case completely checks out. The transmission also features a gear selection mode, auto stick, for more advanced driving characteristics. Other things to note is it is a front-wheel drive with automatic 4-wheel drive through its Freedom Drive 1 system. So while it lacks all those fancy modes for mud, sand, snow, etc., it does still have a 4-wheel drive lock switch that can force a 50-50 power split on the fly. Given this is a compact SUV, it is arguably slow as molasses, but it does have enough power to handle most rugged terrain scenarios that are thrown at it, which is what you ask for in a Jeep. So let's talk now about the maintenance. First things first, every car needs oil, just like humans need blood. If you never change the oil in your car, literally the bare minimum of owning a car, then you absolutely deserve it when that vehicle just sputters on the side of the road and dies. According to the maintenance manual, I am considered a severe duty driver. I live in the backcountry, so I'm subjecting my Jeep to steep and dusty mountain roads during the summer, heavy snow and salted roads in the winter, and of course, because I live in California, heavy smoke from the many, many wildfires we happen to get. So I have to change my Jeep's oil every 4,000 miles or so. Someone who drives in more ideal conditions could get by doing it every 6,000 or even 10,000 miles, but 10,000 is the absolute maximum you can go before you start getting engine damage. Since owning the vehicle and putting approximately 65,000 miles on it over 7 years, I have had to do about 15 oil changes in total. The engine uses about 4.5 liters of oil, which costs about $25, and the oil filter is another 15. So you're looking at, quick math, $600 in oil changes from the time I started driving it. A quick counterpoint is that larger, more capable engines usually have larger oil reservoirs to go with them. If I'm not mistaken, my father's newer Silverado takes 8 liters, so his oil changes are closer to $60 or $70, meaning he'll have spent the same amount after 10 oil changes that I'll have at 15, though he can go a little farther between them, so it's all relative. Moving on. Talking about filters, let's discuss engine air filters and cabin air filters. At the time of writing this, I didn't realize both of mine are slightly overdue. I last did them in late 2021 after various wildfires completely nuked them with soot and grime. Again, this is literal bare minimum stuff, since filters allow fresh air to circulate both in your engine for better fuel economy and power, as well as in your cabin where you are, breathing. Both are incredibly cheap, between $10 and $20. And both can be replaced in about 30 minutes. Why does it take that long? Well, the engine filter box on the Compass has 7 screws on it, which have to be removed, and one of them is in the worst possible spot, but hey, what can you do? And the cabin air filter requires removing the glove box, which is then a bitch to get back on. But hey, it could be worse. Cabin filters can be replaced every 20,000 miles, while engine filters should be replaced every 30,000, and that is according to the owner's manual. Spark plugs. These are very important and one of the first things to go bad on cheaper cars. If they are not maintained, this can damage your ignition coils over time and lead to engine knock, which then damages other components, and that's when your repair bills get nasty. A 4-cylinder engine obviously has 4 plugs, and the manual suggests replacing them at 36,000 miles. This is because the ones out of the factory are your bargain brand copper plugs. This is something FCA, now Stellantis, could do better if they really wanted to. But when you replace yours, you can always put better quality plugs in. For example, I had the copper plugs swapped out for NGK Platinums with V-tips. These plugs last longer and will have to be replaced after 50,000 miles. Mine were put in at about 70k, so they'll go bad by 120k. Simple math there. But there is something even better than Platinum. Higher-end cars often use iridium plugs. Iridium is literally the remains of ancient meteorites. It's incredibly expensive, but iridium plugs will last well over 100,000 miles before needing to be replaced. For some people, that is actually longer than they plan to own their car. Next up, the cooling system. The manual claims you can flush the coolant at 150,000 miles or 10 years, whichever comes first. I find that a little bit of a stretch. I had mine done at 86,000, which is about half that, and I will probably do it again at 150. When this was done, all of the hoses were replaced because hoses are rubber, and rubber can crack after several years of extreme heat and cold, the kind that you get up in the rural mountains. Before we move on, there is one part that is technically part of the cooling system, but is separate. It's the serpentine belt, which drives everything from the water pump to the mechanical fans, as well as the alternator in the electrical system. For some reason, my Jeep has chewed through 2 of these, first at 74,000 and again at 94,000. I don't know if the first one was just bad or I was scammed in the second one, but it's something I do have to keep more of an eye on because, well, if that goes, it would damage a lot of stuff all at once. It's also not listed in the vehicle maintenance record, which honestly is a surprise to me because of how important it is. And boy, is it pricey when it has to be redone. Alright, let's continue. Transmission fluid is very important. Very, very important. Regardless of if you get a car with an automatic, manual, CVT, DCT, etc., you will have to have this done at some point. Don't buy into any automaker that says their transmission is quote-unquote sealed for life. That is bullshit, and failure to change the fluid will cause your transmission to eventually fail. In the maintenance record, there are multiple recommendations because the Compass can come in multiple flavors. The pure 6-speed manual Compasses require fluid changes at 50k. the CVT variants at $60K, and the 6-speed automatics like the one I own are recommended to have it done at $120K. Like the coolant, this was something I elected to have done at half that time, so mine was done at $76K. I then had it done again at $102K because, let's be honest, getting it done is about as cheap or cheaper than the cost of the oil changes I had done between those mileage intervals. It was $160 the first time I had it done, and $210 the second time I had it done, because, well, inflation. And that is still way cheaper overall than if the transmission were to ever break and require a full replacement. Transmissions, as you know, are freakishly expensive. They cost thousands of dollars to replace. So you are much better off paying a few $100 here and there to service them every couple of years, because you'll only have to do it a couple of times over the life of your vehicle, which could be upwards of 200,000 miles, provided you actually take care of it. Like, I might only do this one more time at 150K or so, and then if the car dies, it dies. And that is really the bulk of what you'll maintain on this, or really any vehicle. But now we have to get into the more delicate engine stuff that, yes, I will admit, is nickel and diming you. Chief on this list, RDA and PTU fluids. RDA is rear drive assembly or rear diff, PTU is power transfer unit or front diff. I did have the RDA fluid done at 71K, but the PTU fluid has not been done simply because it requires removing the skid plate, and I never got around to paying to have that done. So if my four-wheel drive system ever overheats or fails, that'll probably be why. Also, the engine mounts. These are literally solid blocks of rubber-coated metal that hold the engine in place, reduce vibration, etc. There are about 4 of these things. They were replaced at $77,000 because they literally fell apart. They were in pieces when the mechanic pulled them out. Now that would have been a bit expensive to do on its own, but I did have it done alongside other maintenance items, such as pulling the throttle body and having it cleaned. The throttle body basically is what allows air to enter the engine, and yes, I'm aware that Compass models have throttle bodies which can fail prematurely, to a degree that there is actually a warning indicator light on the dashboard specifically for this exact occurrence. So cleaning the throttle body at $77K did help prevent a potential future failure, since a replacement throttle body would be like a $300 part. And lastly, there was the issue of the battery. It died at 69,100 miles, not nice. So it was replaced. That was in late 2019, so we're coming up on 5 years, and it will likely have to be replaced again this year or next. $100 that I don't want to spend, but unfortunately that too is a fact of life. Since we're now coming up on about 15 minutes, I think I'm going to cut the video here. Obviously, there are other things that would need to be talked about, suspension, brakes, tires, etc. But I think focusing this video on predominantly the engine and drivetrain related stuff is good enough to get the point across. While I have spent a non-trivial amount maintaining my car, it's not too different than what someone with a higher performance car would have to do anyway. And really the point of this video was to hit home that nothing dire has happened to my Jeep, and it still runs like new because, well, I actually took care of it. So for all the haters, you're free to keep hating, but just know that your hatred is 100% wrong and unfounded. The Compass is a great Jeep, always has been. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you found this informative, and if there is a demand, I will do a part 2 talking about those other things not mentioned. Okay, goodbye.